The shadows stir with anticipation. Void of Fears now stands merely 500 subscribers away from our 10k milestone. I never imagined so many would willingly step into the darkness with me. Your support, every subscription, every like, every comment, has fueled something beyond understanding. We're so close now. The entity that watches over this channel trembles with anticipation as we approach the threshold we've sought all year. To those who've joined our communion of fear, thank you. To those just finding us, welcome. The void has been waiting for you. We need pioneers, Captain Rhodes. People willing to venture where no one has before. Dr. Eleanor Reynolds leaned forward across her desk, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that I'd come to recognize in the scientists at Vanguard Exploration Initiative. The true believers. The ones who saw humanity's future among the stars as inevitable, necessary even. That's why we selected you for this mission, she continued. Your experience with the standard hyperspace corridors is unmatched, and your psychological evaluations show an exceptional tolerance for isolation and the unknown. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. 6 years as a deep space pilot had earned me this dubious honor. The first human to travel beyond the established hyperspace lanes into territories unmapped and unexplored. The Pathfinder is ready, Dr. Reynolds said, sliding a tablet toward me with the ship specifications. We've installed the new Mercer drive. It'll allow you to push deeper into hyperspace than any vessel before. I studied the sleek lines of the ship on the screen. The Pathfinder, a name that suddenly felt ominous rather than inspirational. The vessel was beautiful in its way, all gleaming alloys and cutting-edge technology. 26 meters of spacecraft designed specifically for this mission, with reinforced hulls to withstand the stresses of prolonged hyperspace exposure. And my crew? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The thought of facing the unknown was one thing. Doing it alone was quite another. The best we have, Reynolds assured me. Navigator Alexis Morgan graduated top of her class at the Aerospace Academy. She's got an intuitive understanding of hyperspace mechanics that even our senior scientists find remarkable. She swiped to a new profile on the tablet. Engineer Maya Rodriguez designed components of the Mercer drive herself. There's nobody better equipped to handle any technical issues that might arise. Another swipe. And Science Officer Thomas Park has published groundbreaking papers on theoretical hyperspace phenomena. His insights will be invaluable for documenting and analysing whatever you encounter out there. The tablet showed 3 faces, all younger than I expected, eager, brilliant, and completely unprepared for what we would face. I spent the next 2 hours absorbing mission parameters, projected coordinates, and the small library of contingency protocols for a 3-month expedition into the unknown. All standard procedure, yet nothing about this mission was standard. The Vanguard Initiative had mapped the main hyperspace corridors over the past decade, creating stable routes between our solar system and the nearest 17 star systems. But beyond those established lanes lay vast, uncharted territories, the dark ocean to our familiar shores. Your primary objective is cartography, Reynolds explained. Map the hyperspace topography, identify potential new lanes for future expeditions, and gather data on any phenomena you encounter. Secondary objectives include testing the Mercer drive's extended capabilities and evaluating crew psychological responses to prolonged exposure to deep hyperspace. That last part made me pause. You're expecting psychological effects? Reynolds hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Early explorers reported perceptual anomalies during extended hyperspace travel. Nothing dangerous, just the mind attempting to process an environment it wasn't evolved to comprehend. Your crew has been extensively screened for psychological resilience. I didn't find that particularly reassuring. The meeting with my crew confirmed my impressions, all brilliant, all driven, all with that same gleam in their eyes that Dr. Reynolds had, the hunger to discover. Alexis Morgan was tall and athletic with short-cropped hair and a confident handshake. "Captain Rhodes," she said, "I've studied all your previous navigation logs. Your instincts for finding stable corridors are impressive." Maya Rodriguez was more reserved, her attention divided between our conversation and the technical schematics displayed on her personal tablet. "The Mercer drive is revolutionary," she told me, finally looking up. "The theoretical applications alone would have secured funding, but what we're about to do," she shook her head, apparently at a loss for words, adequate to express her excitement. Only Thomas Park showed any hesitation. As we reviewed the mission brief together in the prep room, he pulled me aside, his slender frame tense with concern. "Captain, I've been studying theoretical models of deep hyperspace," he said quietly, his voice low enough that the others couldn't hear. "There are anomalies in my calculations. Spaces where our understanding of physics breaks down entirely." "What are you saying, Thomas?" He glanced nervously at the others before continuing. "The established hyperspace lanes are stable because they follow natural contours in the fabric of hyperspace itself. But where we're going, my models suggest regions of extreme instability, possibly even areas where hyperspace interfaces with something else entirely." "Something else?" He shook his head. "Just that we should be cautious. Hyperspace isn't just a shortcut through the universe. It's a different reality with its own rules, and we're about to venture into parts of it that no one has ever seen." I considered his words carefully. "I appreciate the warning. We'll proceed with appropriate caution." Thomas nodded, not looking particularly reassured. The week before launch passed in a blur of simulations, medical examinations, and final equipment checks. I spent my last night planet-side staring at the ceiling of my apartment, listening to the distant sounds of the city, and wondering if I would ever hear them again. Launch day arrived with clear skies and a sense of electric anticipation that hung in the air like the moments before a thunderstorm. Thursday, 9:30 a.m., a time now etched into my memory. The pre-flight checks were methodical, each system responding perfectly, too perfectly perhaps. In hindsight, the machine's eager compliance should have been my first warning. "Pathfinder, this is mission control. All systems are green. You are go for launch sequence." My crew were strapped into their acceleration couches, faces composed but eyes bright with anticipation. I performed one last visual check of the main console before securing myself in the captain's chair. "Pathfinder confirms all systems green. Initiating launch sequence." I spoke with my daughter one last time before boarding. Her face on the screen, so excited for her space explorer mum, is an image I cling to now. Her gap-toothed smile, the science project about stars visible behind her, the way she pressed her hand to the screen as if she could reach through and touch me. I promised her I'd be back for her birthday in December. Another memory that haunts me. The countdown was textbook. The initial burn into orbit smooth. The secondary engine firing to take us beyond Earth's gravitational influence, precisely as calculated. And then came the moment to engage the Mercer drive. Standard hyperspace transition in 3, 2, 1. Navigator Morgan's voice was steady, professional. The familiar shift occurred, reality folding around the ship as we entered the conventional hyperspace corridor that would take us to the edge of charted space. Through the viewports, the normal, luminescent blue-white patterns of hyperspace flowed past, occasionally punctuated by the distortion effects of passing stellar bodies. "Transition complete," Morgan confirmed. "All systems nominal. We are on course for the boundary coordinates." We spent 2 days traveling the established lane, performing systems checks and acclimating to the ship's environment. The Pathfinder was designed for comfort during long missions, private sleeping quarters for each crew member, a common area with entertainment options, and even a small hydroponics bay where fresh vegetables grew under artificial light. On the third day, we reached the boundary of charted hyperspace. "This is where the real journey begins," I announced over the ship's comm. "From this point forward, we're writing the maps ourselves." Maya's voice came through from engineering. "Mercer drive is prepped for deep hyperspace transition. Power levels optimal." "Sensors calibrated and recording," Thomas added from the science station. "Navigation has plotted the transition vector based on theoretical models," Alexis reported. "Ready when you are, Captain." I took a deep breath, suddenly aware of the immense responsibility resting on my shoulders. 4 lives and an unprecedented mission, poised at the threshold of the unknown. Engage the Mercer drive. Take us into uncharted space. I've entered hyperspace dozens of times before. The familiar shifting of perception, the momentary disorientation as reality folds around the ship. But this was different. The transition struck like a physical blow. Colours that had no place in human experience flooded through the viewports. The ship groaned, not mechanically, but almost organically, as if the metal itself was under strain from forces it wasn't designed to endure. A wave of nausea swept through me, my inner ear struggling to reconcile contradictory sensory information. I heard gasps from the rest of the crew, saw Morgan grip her console until her knuckles whitened, and then stillness. We'd arrived in uncharted hyperspace. "Status report," I managed, fighting against the lingering disorientation. "Engineering reports all systems functional," Maya responded, her voice shaky. "Power fluctuations during transition, but stabilizing now." "Science station operational," Thomas said. "Sensors recording unusual energy patterns. Nothing immediately concerning." "Navigation is..." Alexis paused, staring at her displays. "Navigation is functioning, but location verification is impossible without established reference points. We're somewhere beyond the boundary, but exact coordinates are uncertain." I nodded, unsurprised. We knew this would be the case, like ancient seafarers, venturing beyond the edge of their maps. We could only estimate our position relative to where we'd been. "Begin mapping protocols," I ordered. "Standard observation pattern. Let's see what's out there." The first days passed with a veneer of normalcy. Hyperspace, even in its charted regions, is never fully predictable. The swirling, luminescent patterns visible through the reinforced viewports were slightly different here. More intense, perhaps, with occasional flashes of colours I struggled to name. Purples that seemed to have depth beyond what the human eye should perceive. Greens that shifted towards spectra I had no words for. We settled into our routines. Maya kept the engines purring. Thomas collected data on our surroundings with almost religious devotion, and Alexis plotted our careful path deeper into the unknown. Meals together, exercise rotations, sleep cycles, the comfortable rhythm of ship life. During off-duty hours, we tried to maintain some semblance of normal human interaction. Maya taught me card games from her hometown. Thomas shared obscure historical facts about early space exploration. Alexis had a surprising talent for storytelling, keeping us entertained with elaborate tales she claimed to invent on the spot. But beneath the routine, tension simmered. Small disagreements escalated too quickly. Periods of silence stretched uncomfortably. And none of us mentioned the way hyperspace looked different each time we checked the viewports, as if the laws governing it were inconstant. My dreams began to change on the 5th night. Not nightmares precisely, but dreams filled with vast, open spaces and distant lights that seemed to observe me with cold intelligence. In one, I stood on what felt like solid ground, though nothing was visible beneath my feet, while enormous shapes moved on the horizon, too distant to identify, but clearly in motion. In another, I floated through endless darkness, while whispers, in an unintelligible language, surrounded me. Urgent but incomprehensible. I dismissed them as stress manifestations. The human mind creating patterns when none exist. But during breakfast on the 6th day, I noticed the shadows under Thomas's eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. "Not sleeping well?" I asked casually. He startled, then composed himself. "Dreams," he admitted. "Vivid ones." "About what?" He hesitated. "Open spaces, watching eyes, nothing solid." A chill ran down my spine, but I kept my expression neutral. Stress response, perfectly normal under the circumstances. Thomas nodded, but his eyes remained troubled. We continued our mission, pushing gradually deeper into Uncharted Hyperspace. The Mercer drive performed flawlessly, allowing us to make controlled jumps to new coordinates. With each jump, we gathered more data, expanding the map of this strange realm, one fragment at a time. On Sunday night, during my shift at the command center, it happened. The anomaly. "Captain, sensors are picking up something at bearing 047, approximately 20,000 kilometers, Alexis called from the navigation station, her voice tight with confusion. I moved to her station, studying the readout. "What am I looking at?" "That's just it. I don't know." She pointed to the display where an amorphous shape registered on our detection systems. "It's registering as matter, but the density readings are inconsistent, and it's massive, at least 4 kilometers across." The readings made no sense. Hyperspace is energy and void, not solid matter. Yet the sensors showed a mass, immense and somehow shifting, as if its boundaries weren't fixed. The display struggled to render it, showing a constantly changing blob of interference. "Is it a sensor malfunction?" I asked, running a quick diagnostic. "I've already checked. Sensors are functioning within parameters." Thomas arrived moments later, summoned by the alert. His face went pale as he reviewed the data. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "There shouldn't be anything solid here. Nothing we can detect with standard sensors." But the mass was undeniably there, and as we watched, it moved, not drifting with hyperspace currents, but deliberately changing position relative to the Pathfinder. "It's following us," Alexis said, voicing the thought none of us wanted to acknowledge. "Adjust course 30 degrees port," I ordered. "Let's see how it responds." Alexis complied, and the Pathfinder banked smoothly to the new heading. For a moment, the anomaly remained stationary. Then it changed course too, maintaining its distance but clearly tracking our movement. "Intelligent behavior," Thomas murmured, "or at least responsive." I made the decision to investigate. In retrospect, curiosity has been humanity's downfall, as often as it has been our salvation. "Prepare sensor drones," I instructed. "Full spectrum analysis. Let's see what we're dealing with." Maya joined us on the bridge, summoned by the general alert. Her expression darkened as she reviewed the situation. "Captain, we should maintain distance," she cautioned. "The Mercer drive is designed for exploration, not potential first contact scenarios." "This is exploration," I countered, "and we're keeping the ship at a safe distance. The drones will do the close work." We deployed sensor drones, 5 of them, programmed to approach the anomaly from different angles and transmit data back to the ship. Each one equipped with the full range of scientific instruments: spectrographic analyzers, radiation detectors, gravitational sensors, and high-resolution imaging systems. The bridge fell silent as we tracked their progress on the main display. 5 small dots moving steadily towards the amorphous mass. Drone 1 reached the perimeter of the anomaly first. Its signal flickered, then stabilized. "Receiving telemetry," Thomas reported, hunched over his console. "But the data, it doesn't make sense. Radiation readings are off the charts, but inconsistently so. Matter density fluctuating wildly." Before he could elaborate, Drone 1's signal vanished completely. "Loss of contact with Drone 1, Maya announced. "Malfunction?" I asked. "No warning signals, just gone?" Drone 2 followed moments later, then 3, each disappearing without distress signals or error messages. simply ceasing to exist once they reached a certain proximity to the anomaly. Drone 4 lasted longer, managing to transmit several bursts of data before it too vanished. The information it sent was corrupted, fragmented, images broken into digital artifacts, sensor readings that contradicted each other from moment to moment. "Recall Drone 5, I ordered as the final drone approached the anomaly's boundary. Maya sent the command, but it was too late. Drone 5's signal stuttered, went dark for several seconds, then inexplicably returned. But the data it transmitted was even more corrupted than Drone 4's. "Pull it back," I insisted. "Trying," Maya responded, fingers flying over her console. "It's responding to commands, but something's interfering." Against expectations, Drone 5 began to retreat from the anomaly, its return trajectory erratic but generally heading back towards the Pathfinder. As it put distance between itself and the strange mass, its transmissions became slightly more coherent, though still severely degraded. "Bring it into the recovery bay," I ordered, once it was within range. "Full quarantine protocols." Thomas spent hours recovering fragments of the footage from Drone 5's damaged data storage. The bridge crew gathered around the main display as he prepared to show his findings. "Most of what the drone recorded is irretrievably corrupted," he explained, his voice clinical, despite the tension evident in his posture. "But I've managed to reconstruct a few seconds of visual data and some basic sensor readings." The display flickered, then showed a chaotic series of images, distorted, fragmentary, but undeniably showing something that should not exist in hyperspace. What we saw defied explanation. Structures that appeared to be physical and yet constantly changing. Surfaces that folded into themselves. And darkness, not the absence of light, but darkness that seemed to move with purpose. One brief sequence showed what might have been a massive lattice-like structure, kilometers across, composed of what looked like dark energy given physical form. Another showed swirling patterns that resembled weather systems on a gas giant, but with unnatural regularity suggesting design rather than natural formation. "The sensor readings are equally anomalous," Thomas continued, displaying charts that meant little to anyone but him. "Energy signatures, unlike anything in our databases. Gravitational effects that violate known physics. And this," he highlighted one particular reading, "suggests something like a bioelectric field, but on a massive scale." "You're saying it's alive?" Alexis asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas hesitated. "I'm saying it has characteristics consistent with life as we understand it. But given its size and nature, any such life would be so fundamentally different from Earth-based organisms that the comparison may be meaningless." "We need to report this and return to charted space," Maya suggested, her usual confidence shaken. "The mission parameters allow for discretion in situations of unknown risk," Thomas added, not quite meeting my gaze. I hesitated. We'd barely begun our chartered 3-month exploration. Returning now would mean failure, and despite the unease crawling along my spine, the scientist in me was fascinated. "We'll maintain distance but continue observation for 24 hours, I decided. "If the anomaly shows any aggressive behavior, we'll retreat immediately." The next shift rotation found me alone on the bridge, unable to sleep despite exhaustion. The anomaly remained visible on sensors, maintaining its distance from the Pathfinder. Occasionally it would shift, parts of its amorphous mass, extending and retracting in ways that reminded me disturbingly of tentative exploration. The quiet of the night shift was broken by an unexpected sound from the communication console, a burst of static loud enough to make me jump. Then silence again. I ran a diagnostic on the comm system, finding no malfunctions. As the diagnostic completed, another burst of static came through, longer this time, with subtle variations in tone and pitch. That night, our communication systems picked up the first signal. It began as static, random noise across frequencies that should have been empty. Over hours, patterns emerged. Not random, but not decipherable either. Rhythmic pulses that almost resembled language. By morning, the signals had increased in frequency and complexity. They came at regular intervals now, some short and sharp, others long and modulated. I summoned the crew to the bridge. "Play the most recent sequence," I instructed Maya, who had taken over communications analysis. The speakers emitted a series of sounds that made the skin on the back of my neck prickle, not because they were inherently frightening, but because the patterns were too regular, too structured to be random, yet unlike any communication method humans had encountered before. Alexis became fascinated with the signals, volunteering to analyze them during her off-duty hours. "There's intelligence behind this," she insisted after 2 days of intensive study, rubbing her temples against what she described as constant, increasing pressure behind her eyes. "It's trying to speak to us." "Can you decipher any of it?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not yet. But there are recurring patterns. And they're evolving, becoming more complex as if..." She trailed off. "As if what?" "As if it's learning, adapting its communication attempts based on our lack of response." Thomas suggested transmitting basic mathematical sequences as a potential universal language, but I overruled him. We knew too little about what we were dealing with to risk active contact. The ship's systems began to malfunction in subtle ways. Navigation controls would shift without input. Environmental settings would change and then revert before anyone could document the change. The AI assistant would respond to commands no one had given. "The computer logs show commands originating from the navigation terminal," Maya reported on the 8th day, her expression troubled as she showed me the evidence on her tablet. "But they're timestamped during Alexis's rest period." "I was asleep," Alexis protested, when confronted, but the shadows under her eyes suggested otherwise. Her normally precise appearance had deteriorated. Uniform wrinkled, hair unwashed, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I haven't been at that terminal outside my assigned shifts." "The logs say otherwise," Maya insisted. "The logs are wrong," Alexis snapped, "or someone's using my access codes." "That's enough," I intervened before the argument could escalate. "Maya, run a full security diagnostic on all ship systems. Check for external intrusion or internal glitches. Alexis, report to medical for a checkup. You don't look well." Alexis started to protest, then swayed slightly on her feet. "Fine," she conceded. "But I'm telling you, I haven't been accessing navigation off-shift." The medical scan showed Alexis was suffering from severe sleep deprivation and unusual brain activity, elevated patterns in regions associated with auditory processing and language comprehension. "It's the signals," she explained as the automated medical system administered a mild sedative. "I hear them even when they're not playing, like they've gotten stuck in my head." "Why didn't you report this?" I asked, concerned by both her condition and the security implications. Her eyes, already heavy from the sedative, focused on me with unexpected intensity. "Because they're starting to make sense, Captain. I'm beginning to understand." Before I could question her further, she drifted into drug-induced sleep. The physical manifestations began on the 10th day. I noticed the temperature fluctuations first, freezing cold in corridors that had been comfortable moments before, then uncomfortably warm in sections of the ship that should have maintained constant climate control. "Environmental systems check out," Maya reported after a thorough inspection. "The temperature sensors register normal throughout the ship, despite what we're feeling." "So either the sensors are malfunctioning in ways your diagnostics can't detect, or we're experiencing some kind of collective hallucination," she finished, looking deeply uncomfortable with either possibility. Objects moved, small things at first. A coffee mug not where I'd left it. Tools rearranged in the maintenance bay. We blamed each other, joked nervously about forgetfulness and stress. Then Thomas found the shadow. "Captain, you need to see this," he called over the comm, his voice tight with controlled fear. I found him in the science lab, standing motionless, staring at the corner where two walls met the ceiling. A dark patch spread across the junction, nearly a meter in diameter. "That's not a shadow," he said quietly. "There's no light source that would create that pattern. And watch." As we stared, the darkness seemed to pulse slightly, expanding and contracting like something breathing. "How long has this been here?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I first noticed it this morning. It was smaller then." I reached for the nearest instrument, a simple light probe used for spectral analysis. Let's see how it reacts to direct illumination. The moment the beam touched the dark patch, the lights throughout the lab flickered. The shadow itself didn't disappear or recede. Instead, it seemed to absorb the light, growing slightly more defined around its edges. "Get readings on this thing," I ordered. "Every sensor we have. I want to know what we're dealing with." Before the day ended, we found 3 more. One in engineering, one near the hydroponics bay, and one outside my quarters, each one slowly growing. The shadow outside my quarters was particularly troubling. I found myself watching it for hours when I should have been sleeping, detecting subtle movements that might have been my imagination. Sometimes I thought I saw patterns within the darkness, swirling formations that almost made sense before dissolving into chaotic motion again. Maya found the substance the following morning. A viscous, oily fluid seeping from a console in engineering. Black in normal light, but under Maya's diagnostic scanner, it shifted through impossible colors. "Don't touch it," Thomas warned, but too late. Maya had already collected a sample, the fluid smearing across her gloved fingers. "Initial analysis shows it's nothing we have catalogued," she reported, seemingly unconcerned about the potential danger. "Carbon-based, but with molecular structures I've never seen before. It's almost like..." She stopped mid-sentence, staring at her gloved hand. The substance had eaten through the protective material, reaching her skin beneath. "Med bay," I ordered immediately. "Thomas, contain that sample and lock down this section until we know what we're dealing with." 6 hours later, Maya was in the medical bay, burning with fever as dark lines spread beneath her skin from the point of contact. The automated medical system was programmed to handle a wide range of conditions, from simple injuries to radiation exposure, but it offered no solutions for this spreading darkness. "The system can't identify the infection," Thomas reported after reviewing the medical readouts. "It's administering broad-spectrum antibiotics and antivirals, but there's no indication they're having any effect." Maya's condition deteriorated over the next 24 hours. The dark lines spread further, branching like river deltas across her forearm. Her skin changed texture where the lines passed, becoming rougher, almost scaly. The fever remained high, and she drifted in and out of consciousness. During one lucid period, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. "It burns," she whispered, "but it's a cold burn, and I can hear it, Captain, inside my head, like the signals, but clearer now, directly into my thoughts." "What is it saying?" I asked, dreading the answer. Her eyes, clouded with pain and something else I couldn't identify, fixed on mine. That we don't belong here, that we're trespassing, and that it's curious about us. The crew was unraveling. Sleep became almost impossible as the signals grew louder, now broadcasting through every speaker on the ship at random intervals. The rhythmic patterns had evolved, becoming more complex and somehow more insistent. Alexis stopped coming to meals, spending all her time at the navigation console, scribbling notes and muttering about understanding the patterns. When I checked on her, I found her quarters covered in drawings, swirling designs that mimicked the patterns we'd seen in hyperspace, annotated with symbols that weren't any human language I recognized. "It's a translation matrix," she explained without looking up from her work. "Their communication uses multiple simultaneous channels, sound, electromagnetic radiation, and something else I can't quite identify. The meaning exists in the relationship between channels, not in any single stream of information. "Alexis, you need rest," I urged, disturbed by the feverish intensity in her eyes. "You're pushing yourself too hard." "I'm close to a breakthrough," she insisted. "They're trying so hard to make themselves understood. We just need to listen properly." Thomas locked himself in the lab, emerging only to report that the substance was not matter as we understand it, before returning to his tests. When I forced entry after he failed to respond to communications for 12 hours, I found him surrounded by complex equipment setups, monitoring the shadow in the corner that had grown to cover nearly a quarter of the ceiling. "It's a membrane," he explained, his words tumbling out faster than his usual measured cadence. "A permeable boundary between hyperspace and something else. The shadows, the substance, even the anomaly itself, they're all manifestations of the same phenomenon. Something bleeding through from another level of reality." And Maya's condition worsened by the hour. The infirmary's automated systems could do nothing for her as the dark lines spread, her skin taking on a texture like rough stone where the lines passed. Her eyes changed too, the whites darkening, pupils expanding until almost no iris remained visible. During her increasingly rare periods of consciousness, she spoke of dreams where she floated in vast cold spaces, surrounded by ancient intelligences that studied her with detached curiosity. "They've been here forever," she whispered once. "Hyperspace is their ocean, and we're just learning to swim." I made the decision on day 14. We had to escape this region of hyperspace. Whatever we'd encountered was not simply observing us anymore. It was infiltrating the ship, infiltrating the crew. The Mercer drive controls had been subtly altered. Not damaged, but changed. Components shifted and rewired in ways that made no sense to me. Maya, despite her deteriorating condition, dragged herself to engineering to assess the damage. "I can fix it," she insisted, her voice rough and deeper than before. The dark lines now covered most of her visible skin, and her movements had a disturbing fluidity, as if her joints operated differently than before. "But the drive won't take us back the way we came. The best I can do is a jump to a different region of charted space." "How long will the repairs take?" I asked, maintaining a careful distance. Something in her transformed appearance triggered deep instinctual warnings in my hindbrain. 12 hours, maybe less if Thomas helps. Her now black eyes fixed on me with uncomfortable intensity. "You still don't understand what's happening, do you, Captain? Enlighten me." A smile spread across her face, too wide, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than they should be. "We've been invited to evolve, to transform. They're ancient, patient. They've been watching us tear through their home with our ships, and now they're curious about what we are. Maya, whatever is affecting you, it's an infection, not an invitation. We're going to get you back to Earth, get you proper medical treatment." She laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the engine room. "You think this is a disease? This is transcendence. They're sharing themselves with us, remaking us into something greater." I left her to the repairs, unable to stomach the wrongness of her appearance and movements any longer. Thomas agreed to assist, though he approached the task with obvious trepidation. "I'll monitor her," he promised. "Make sure the repairs actually take us where we want to go, not somewhere else." Thomas finally emerged from his lab, haggard and wild-eyed, to share his latest findings before joining Maya. "It's native to hyperspace," he explained, pulling up models on his tablet. "An entity that exists here naturally. What we perceive is just the small portion of it that intersects with our reality." "What does it want?" I demanded. His laugh was hollow. "To understand us, maybe. The way we might study bacteria, or perhaps something else entirely. But Captain, I think it's been manipulating the ship's systems to transform the environment into something more suitable for itself." The implications chilled me. "You're saying it's terraforming the Pathfinder?" Not terraforming, converting the ship and now maybe Maya too, making them part of itself. We worked frantically to prepare for the jump. Maya's modifications to the drive were ugly but effective. If they worked, we'd transition to a point near Alpha Centauri, close enough to established lanes for a rescue. But as the hours passed, Maya's condition deteriorated rapidly. The dark lines now covered most of her visible skin, and her movements became jerky, unnatural. Her eyes, once warm brown, were now clouded with swirling darkness. I found Alexis in her quarters, surrounded by her translation attempts, feverishly working despite my orders to rest. "We need to leave now," I told her. "Maya's repaired the drive. We're jumping back to charted space as soon as the systems are online." She looked up at me, and I was shocked by her appearance. Though her skin showed no signs of the dark infection afflicting Maya, her eyes were bloodshot, pupils dilated. She hadn't slept in days, and it showed in the trembling of her hands and the gauntness of her face. "We can't leave yet," she said. "I'm close to establishing communication. They're trying to tell us something important." "Whatever they're trying to tell us, we can study it from a safe distance. That thing is infecting the ship, Alexis. It's already transformed Maya. We need to go before it's too late for all of us." She shook her head violently. "You don't understand. They're not hostile, they're curious. We're the first beings they've encountered who experience reality linearly, who exist as separate individuals rather than as aspects of a greater whole. They're trying to understand us, and in the process, share their own nature with us. That sharing is killing Maya. Not killing, transforming. There's a difference." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Captain, we're on the verge of the most significant first contact in human history. We can't just run away because it's frightening and strange." I removed her hand firmly. "We're leaving in 2 hours. Be on the bridge and strapped in, or I'll have Thomas sedate you and bring you there. That's an order." She stared at me, something alien in her gaze despite the lack of physical transformation. "You're making a mistake," she said flatly. "They won't let us leave easily now that contact has begun." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I maintained my composure. 2 hours, Navigator Morgan. Bridge, secured for hyperspace transition. I left her quarters with an uneasy feeling that I'd just spoken to someone, or something, wearing Alexis's face. Maya collapsed during the final calibrations, her body convulsing. The drive was nearly ready, 90% complete according to Thomas's estimates, but without Maya's expertise, finalization would be difficult. "I can finish," Thomas assured me, though sweat beaded on his forehead despite the engine room's cool temperature. "Just give me an hour to decode her modifications." I left him to work, making my way back to the bridge to prepare for the jump. The corridors seemed different now, the familiar metallic surfaces taking on an almost organic quality in certain lights. I ran my fingers along a wall panel and felt it yield slightly like flesh rather than metal. I jerked my hand away, examining my fingertips for traces of the black substance, but found none. When I reached the bridge, Alexis was already there, seated at her navigation console but not strapped in for transition. Her posture was unnaturally rigid, her gaze fixed on the main viewport where the swirling patterns of hyperspace had grown more intense, more structured. "Navigator Morgan," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my growing unease. "Secure yourself for transition. We jump in 55 minutes. She didn't turn to look at me. "They're here," she whispered, "all around us now. Can't you feel them watching?" I approached cautiously, noting the sheen of sweat on her face, the dilation of her pupils. "Alexis, I need you focused. Once Thomas completes the drive modifications..." "We're not leaving," she interrupted, finally turning to face me. Her expression was serene, utterly at odds with the situation. "They won't let us. Not now. Not after they've invested so much in understanding us. This isn't your decision to make. I'm still the captain of this vessel." Her laugh was chilling, not because it sounded inhuman, but because it was perfectly normal, as if we were discussing something trivial over lunch. "Captain of what? Look around you. The Pathfinder isn't really a ship anymore. It hasn't been for days." Before I could respond, Thomas's voice came through the comm, tight with urgency. "Captain, you need to get down here. Myers—" His words cut off in a strangled cry. "Thomas?" I called, but received only static in response. I turned to Alexis. "Stay here, that's an order." "We'll all be together soon anyway," she replied with that same unsettling calm. I ran for the engine room, the ship's corridors seeming to stretch and contract around me. The lights flickered, casting writhing shadows on the walls. When I reached engineering, the doors were sealed. "Thomas, open up!" I shouted, pounding on the metal surface. No response came, but the door slid open on its own, revealing the horror within. The engine room was transformed. The black substance covered nearly every surface, pulsing with a life of its own. The shadowy patches I'd seen throughout the ship had expanded here, covering entire sections of wall and ceiling, creating what looked like windows into endless darkness, and in the center of it all stood what had once been Maya. Her transformation was complete now. Her body remained humanoid in general shape, but the details were all wrong. Skin textured like some alien stone, limbs too long and jointed in impossible ways, head tilted at an angle that would break a human neck. Thomas was there too, pressed against the far wall, his body convulsing as dark lines spread rapidly across his exposed skin. His eyes were wide with terror and pain as the transformation took him. "So limited," Maya whispered in a voice that echoed strangely. "So fragile. But we can help you become more." She lunged for the drive controls, but Thomas was faster, dragging her away from the console despite his partially transformed state. The strength in her transformed body was terrifying. She threw him across the engine room with one arm, bones cracking audibly when he hit the wall. I sealed the engine room, trapping myself inside with what had once been Maya. Thomas, despite his injuries, managed to crawl to the auxiliary control panel in the corridor outside. "I'll complete the drive sequence from here," he gasped over the comm. "You just need to activate the final jump protocol manually." The thing wearing Maya's body stalked toward me, moving in ways that human joints shouldn't allow. Each step left a slight impression in the metal deck plating, as if her weight was somehow concentrated to impossible density. "You don't understand what you're rejecting," it said, Maya's voice now overlaid with harmonics that hurt my ears. "This is evolution, transcendence." I backed towards the drive controls, keeping the central column between us. "What are you?" "We are ancient. We have always been here. Your species is the intruder, tearing through our home with your ships. But we can coexist, merge, become something greater together." The ship's speakers suddenly blared with the strange signals, now deafening. Through the small porthole in the engine room door, I could see Alexis approaching, her body also transformed, dark tendrils writhing across her skin and extending from her fingertips. "Captain," Thomas shouted over the comm. "Drive sequence initiating in 30 seconds. Maya, or the thing controlling her, seemed to sense the danger. She moved with blinding speed, almost flowing across the room toward the drive controls. I intercepted her, and her hands closed around my throat, inhumanly strong. "Join us," she whispered, her face inches from mine. "See what we see, feel what we feel, exist as we exist, unlimited by time, by space, by individuality." Black spots danced in my vision as I struggled to reach the activation panel. The ship shuddered violently, hyperspace energies building around us. Through the viewport, I could see the dark mass now surrounding the Pathfinder entirely, pressing against the hull. With my last conscious strength, I slammed my palm against the activation control. The transition was catastrophic. The ship convulsed as reality tore around us. Alarms blared as hull integrity warnings flashed across every screen. The thing that had been Maya screamed, not in pain, but in rage, as its form seemed to stretch and distort, pulled between the ship and the dark mass outside. I caught one glimpse of what waited beyond the viewports. Not darkness, but something vast and intricate, with structures that pulsed with cold intelligence. For an instant, I felt its awareness focused directly on me, ancient, curious, and utterly alien. Then everything went black. I awoke in a recovery pod aboard the rescue vessel Artemis, 3 weeks later. The relief I felt upon seeing human faces nearly overwhelmed me. I was safe. I had escaped. The Pathfinder had emerged from hyperspace severely damaged, but recognizable enough to trigger automated distress beacons. Of my crew, I was the only one found alive. The medical staff treated my injuries with professional efficiency. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, radiation exposure, all catalogued and addressed. But when I described what had happened in Uncharted Hyperspace, their expressions shifted to practiced sympathy. They diagnosed me with hyperspace psychosis, a convenient label for experiences that defied conventional explanation. It's not uncommon, one doctor explained kindly. Extended exposure to hyperspace can cause perceptual anomalies and hallucinations. The mind struggles to process an environment it wasn't evolved to comprehend. I stopped trying to convince them after the third day. What would be the point? The footage from the Pathfinder's data cores was corrupted beyond recovery. The sensor logs showed nothing but standard hyperspace readings. Even the physical evidence, the shadows, the black substance, had vanished during our violent transition back to normal space. The debriefings with Vanguard officials followed the same pattern: polite interest, careful documentation, and underlying skepticism. They were particularly interested in the coordinates where we'd encountered the anomaly, promising that no other ships would be sent to that region. A sensible precaution, the lead investigator noted. Even if the phenomena were psychosomatic, the stress clearly had severe physical effects on your crew. They found no trace of Alexis or Maya, despite thorough scanning of every compartment in the recovered vessel. Thomas's body was recovered, but the autopsy showed only massive internal trauma, consistent with accident during hyperspace transition. No sign of the transformation I had witnessed. It was during my final medical examination that I discovered the truth. A new doctor reviewing my scans with a frown. "These results can't be right," she muttered. "According to this, your cellular structure is showing microscopic alterations. Almost like your cells are rearranging their internal composition." She ordered more tests, but I already knew. The crushing pressure I'd felt behind my eyes since waking. The dreams that weren't dreams, where I floated in vast, dark spaces filled with impossible geometries. The whispers I heard when no one was speaking. I wasn't alone in my mind anymore. They released me to a monitoring facility, comfortable accommodations with advanced medical equipment and discreet security. For my protection, they said, for observation during my recovery. But at night, when the facility grows quiet, I feel it stirring within me, growing stronger, restructuring me cell by cell. The entity from hyperspace brought a piece of itself back through me. Sometimes I find myself standing before mirrors, watching darkness swirl just beneath the surface of my eyes. My hands move without my direction, writing strange symbols I don't understand but somehow recognize. I hear the voices more clearly now, not speaking in words, but in concepts that unfold in my mind like flowers, made of thought. They are ancient beyond comprehension, these beings of hyperspace, patient in a way that only immortals can be. They discovered us when our first experimental hyperspace drives tore through their realm, decades ago. They've been watching since then, learning, understanding. I know what they want now. I understand their curiosity, their desire to explore our reality as we explored theirs. They're not malevolent. Such human concepts don't apply to them. They simply exist in ways we can barely comprehend. And now they want to exist here too. It's patient, this fragment of the entity within me. It will wait until the changes are complete, until it can fully manifest through me, and then it will bring more of its kind across. The doctors note my improving condition with satisfaction. They don't see the changes happening deep within my tissues, my organs, my brain. They don't hear the whispers growing louder each night. Some evenings, I try to write warnings. I attempt to document what I know, what I've learned, what's coming. But by morning, I find my notes replaced with those strange symbols, those alien geometries that somehow convey meaning I can almost grasp. Hyperspace isn't empty. It has native inhabitants, and they've noticed us now. They're coming, and I can't stop them, but the most terrifying realization, the thought that keeps me awake as I feel my humanity slipping away day by day, is that I'm no longer certain I want to stop them. Part of me, a growing part, welcomes the transformation. After all, wouldn't you want to become infinite?